All right, so we might get started. So my name is Robin Flexman, and as you can see by the front of the book, I was actually the series consultant for the book. So I've done the review of the book to make sure that it aligns to the Queensland curriculum. I'm not actually one of the authors. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what this part of the series is about. If you're using the 1 and 2, you'll see some very good similarities between it because it's the same familiar layout. Who's using Unit 1 and 2 books? Okay, so it should be bits and bits, so it should be familiar to you. So from the discussion that you've just had, we've sort of answered that question. Are we ready for the new assessments? Probably the resounding answer there is no, not really, but we'll see what we can do to assist you with that. So the 4 things that we're going to talk about today is a brief overview of the syllabus, looking at Units 3 and 4 and the content of Unit 3 and 4. Talk to you about what the book looks like, so the features of the book, and as I said, it's very similar to the Unit 1 and 2 book if you are using that. An overview of the internal assessments and how Oxford have developed the resources to assist you or support you and your kids in doing the assessment, and then Jenna will talk about the pricing guidelines and that sort of thing, and then we'll have some questions. So as I said, my name's Robin Flexman. Currently sitting in an acting DP role at Alex Hills. My substantive position is Science Head of Department. I am currently panel chair for biology for Brisbane East District. I am one of the lead endorsers in the endorsement, well I hope to be. I'll have a national offer at the moment, but have done the training for endorsement. I was involved in the endorsement process when they did the trial a couple of years ago. It was our district that they chose to go through that process. Have been a QCS writer and QCS marker, NAPLAN marker, so I've done quite a lot of stuff with QCAA. Took a little bit of a sabbatical a couple of years ago and went and worked for Queensland Minerals and Energy Academy as a project officer, realigning all of their programs that they do with the kids to get them into the resource sector to our curriculum, and had 18 months visiting different mine signs around the state, which was a fantastic experience, and got to see a lot of different things out of the classroom and got to visit a lot of different schools in different parts of the state to see great work that they were doing. Key dates, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, or hopefully you are familiar with. So this is set on a 4-term plan for Year 11 and a 4-term plan for Year 12, but as we've just had in that little discussion, I think 99% of schools in Queensland have compressed Unit 1 and 2 into 3 terms, ready to start Unit 3 for Term 4. So these timelines may not suit what you're doing, but it's just a suggestion of what you're doing. The important dates to remember is that 16th of August for the endorsement upload of IA1 and IA2 in preparation for Unit 3. Mock assessments will be available, so they are 2 external exams. Will be available from QCAA. 1 will be on the public site, 1 will be in the portal that the kids won't see. So we are planning to use that as our sort of trial external exam run for the kids at some stage. Not sure if you are aware, but the sample assessments which were sitting in the portal are now out on the public QCAA site, complete with answers. So don't think that you can be sneaky and use any of those questions in your IA1, 2 and 3 that you're going to submit for endorsement. They will not get endorsed because the questions are there for the kids to see. So just take that back to your schools if you weren't already aware of that little fun fact that we found out a few weeks ago. Probably the next important date is week 2 of Term 1 next year, where IA3 needs to be uploaded for endorsement. So that first endorsement event, as they're calling it, will happen on the 24th and 25th of August. You will have your decisions back in your schools by the 30th of August, and then you have until, I think it's the second week of September to fix anything that you need fixed to have it resubmitted to be endorsed then. If you don't get it endorsed the second time through, QCAA will contact you to talk about what you need to do to get that piece of assessment right. Confirmation, so the uploading of IA1 results is the 20th of March, so week 6 of Term 1. So if you are starting Unit 3 in Term 4. It's probably a school-based decision as to whether you're doing your IA1 at the end of this year or if you're keeping it over to the holidays and doing it when the kids come back next year. IA1 and IA2 and 3 are then submitted in August for confirmation. So the kids will know their confirmed results for those 3 pieces of assessment. So they will know what they will have out of 50 before they start to prepare for those external exams. The other thing that I'm not sure if you're aware of or not, the provisional results that you are probably about to sign for Unit 1, so the satisfactory, unsatisfactory that we have to load into the portal, stay provisional until December. So if you haven't assessed all of the objectives for Unit 1 and then you do a combined Unit 1-2 exam and revisit some of those objectives and the kids can actually do it in that 1 and 2 exam, you can go and change back. You can go and change that provisional result that you've put in for Unit 1, which is going to be all important when we're calculating QCE points. Didn't know that? Okay.
We had a lot of discussion about it, but hearing it, it's kind of like, I told the kids, if you're not putting in the effort.
Yeah, see, and I think the other issue is we've had, because we've finished Unit 1, our kids have just started Unit 2, we've had some movement, so obviously they haven't satisfied, so theoretically we can't actually give them credit for Unit 1.
Yeah, that was what our discussion was about.
But QCA have sort of realised that, so I think they're going to do some relaxations around that. Okay, so this you should be familiar with. So the topics which are covered in Year 11, Unit 1 and 2. So as I said, most of you are probably pretty much through Unit 1 or completed Unit 1, having looked at the cells and cell structure. Moving into homeostasis and disease, and then choose your own adventure with your assessments. So whether you chose to do the 4 assessments across those 2 units or you chose to do the 2, do 1 for Unit 1 and 1 for Unit 2, that was a school-based decision that we had a little bit of flexibility around. Moving into Unit 3 or Year 12, we don't refer to Year 11 and 12 anymore with our kids, we just say Unit 1, 2 and 3, so it's been a big language shift for us. Getting that message across to the parents as well, getting the kids to realise that they're not working in the same terms as the rest of the school has been interesting, to say the least. So Unit 3, looking at biodiversity, fieldwork will sit in there somewhere, doing the 2 pieces of assessment, so your data test and your student experiment, and then Unit 4, looking at evolution, DNA, continuity of life, your research investigation, which is a new assessment style for us, and then that all-important external exam. So what's in store for you with this volume of the book? So the same support, so there are lots and lots of resources there. If you're using 1 and 2, you would have hopefully discovered all the resources that sit in the digital platform. There's very similar sorts of resources, obviously, that go along with this one to support you. The content, it is all in there, so all those syllabus dot points appear somewhere in there, because that was one of the things that I did when I was doing the review on it. This is what I think is different. So somebody just made the comment interestingly about how different our syllabus that we've been using since the 19s something to now. No, I think it was 2004 was our rewrite, wasn't it? How different it is. Okay, so when I first looked at the content in this syllabus, these are the things that stuck out to me, okay, about what's different and what we haven't had to teach in biology for a number of years. So you may have some different thoughts about this. So this is what I think the kids are going to get stuck on, and I think that possibly some of our younger teachers are probably going to get stuck on, because they wouldn't have done this in high school, or possibly even if they've done a science degree, they may not have done it at university either. There's a couple of young girls in the workshop yesterday who had no idea what some of these things were, which is interesting. So it's a big learning curve for those young teachers as well. Not just the young teachers. Nice of you to admit that. Okay, so as you guys just mentioned, the statistics and the calculations. We haven't had to do calculations like this for a long, long time. When I first looked at this, I thought, oh, great, because this is the stuff that I love doing. I did an ecology major when I did my degree, and this is the stuff that I love doing, because I love doing all the field work and doing all the associated analysis with all of that sort of data. Took me back to my days of when we did our field trip on Bribie Island. We had to mark and recapture the Melanies running around Bribie Island, thinking, oh, they were the days. Cladograms, I think, is a sticking point for me, interpreting those little tree diagrams with the numbers. What do those numbers mean? It's something that it's not in our junior curriculum. The kids have not seen it. Vaguely remember there was a C2C assessment that had it, but I don't think it ever saw the light of day when we realistically moved away from C2C. So I think these things are the other concepts that the kids may struggle with, and as you admitted, some of you may struggle with as well. In topic 2, the energy transfer and carrying capacity, more calculations, again, remembering those formula. We don't have a nice formula book like the chemists and the physics do, so the kids are actually going to have to probably remember some of this stuff and definitely know how to apply it into different situations. Growth curves is probably the easiest of those concepts, I think, but again, it's different. It's new for the kids. Moving into the Unit 4, so the genetic stuff. Biotechnology, I think, is going to be a sticking point for most schools, or a lot of schools. We have a biotechnology unit in our current syllabus, so we have the luxury of having all the electrophoresis tanks and running gels and extracting DNA. We do the PGLO-PRAC, so the bacterial transformation is one of our assessments for our ER for that unit at the moment. But there are a lot of schools that have not included biotech in our current work programs. So I think that's going to be a sticking point for a lot of schools as well. The technology and like the processes, the methods that are used in biotechnology is forever changing because it's a relatively new part of biology. So keeping up with that and keeping up with what's changing in the industry is going to be a big ask too, I think. For the evolution or continuity of life part, again, looking at those phylogenetic relationships, it's not just doing Punnett squares, working out phenotypic ratios. There's a lot more stuff there. Looking at the gene flow, the shift, speciation, and again, it's a lot more depth to what we're used to teaching. So as I said, these are just the things that stuck out to me when I had a read of the syllabus, and that you may have some different thoughts. Is anybody else, if you've had a look or if you've been having a look, doing some prep for Unit 3 and 4, is there anything else that you think is going to be a sticking point for you?
No, that's enough.
That's enough? Okay. Don't need any more? Okay, so the 5 things that Oxford have done to support you and hopefully give the kids the best opportunity to do their best. So as I said, if it's in the syllabus, it's in the book. Okay? There is some scaffolded learning, and in each chapter opening, so on that front page of each chapter, the same as it is in the Unit 1 and 2 book, it clearly identifies which of the dot points are going to be covered in that chapter, and then it's reiterated at the beginning of each of the sections. The second one, extensive support for assessment. So there are lots and lots of review style questions throughout the book. Then at the end of each chapter there are some more questions. There are lots and lots of editable worksheets on the digital platform. So if you don't like the style of question, or if you don't like the particular question on any of those particular worksheets, you can change it. When I was doing the review, I was very aware of the cog verbs and the use of the cog verbs to make sure that they were used in the right context and in such a way that the kids could develop those skills around answering those questions with the cognitive verbs. Remembering that somebody who does not know your students is going to be marking that all-important external exam, they need to be very, very explicit about how they respond to those cognitive verbs. You know how your kids write and you know their little tricks and stuff like that, but if it's me that has your student's exam to mark, I don't know that. So the kids have to be very, very clear about what they're explaining. If you haven't discovered it, on the portal, there is a cognitive verb toolkit that sits in the portal, which is a series of posters. There's about 17 of the cognitive verbs, and it's usually a 3 or 4 sheet package for each one of those, which clearly explains a cognitive verb, how to break it down. There's a little self-check thing to see if the kids can actually understand the cognitive verb and to use it in the right context. Remembering that analyse for us is the same for analyse in chemistry, physics and even English if it appears in the English syllabus. So the kids are getting it hopefully 5 or 6 times depending on how many general subjects they're doing, and they should be quite familiar with it. The workbooks. Alright, so the workbook is a series of worksheets, and it's intended to be a write-on resource. Okay? When I first started talking to Oxford about the features that I thought were important, that was one of the important things for me, because I think the kids do too much digitally in a lot of their schoolwork today, and they've forgotten how to write. And as I just said, that writing and being very, very clear is going to be super important in that external exam. The more we get them to write, the better they're going to get at it. Okay, I think it's one of the skills that they've sort of lost. So there's a whole series of different types of activities in those workbooks, which we'll talk about in a moment when I'll show you some examples of the pages. Practice data tests, cumulative data tests, and there's a lot of stuff in the O book which Jenna will talk about. And the sciences of human endeavour is spread throughout. Usually it's the case studies throughout the chapter, and we'll have a look at one of those shortly. Easier to use and more accessible than ever before. So once you get set up in the platform, and the lovely Oxford people will do that for you, and they'll even come out and demonstrate to your staff how to get the most out of that platform. Great resource for assigning work to the kids if you think you're going to be away, or if you do a flipped classroom model in your classroom, you can assign them some work to do at home and then check it in class, or there's lots of different ways that you can access that information. Reduced amount of content on the page, graphic organisers, so getting the kids to think concisely and organise that information in a logical way. Okay? If you present it to them in a couple of different ways, thinking about their different learning styles, hopefully it will connect with them at some stage. Different ranges of questions, so there are some very, very simple questions and then up to some more complex type questions. Nowhere in our standards is there complex and challenging anymore, but we still need to be able to differentiate between the kids so that we can meet those reporting standards. Full coverage of the syllabus pracs, both the mandatory and suggested pracs. So at the beginning of each chapter it tells you, it outlines for you which of the pracs are covered in that particular chapter. There are also videos which Oxford have made which sit on their digital platform of each of the mandatory pracs. So that's a video of somebody actually doing the prac. So that could be one way of perhaps getting around that electrophoresis if you don't have access to tanks and things like that. Risk assessments, which your laddies may have already discovered in the portal, so that you don't need to worry about doing the risk assessments, they're all there for you. And then there's worksheets which go along with the pracs. Full support for teachers to encourage student success. So as I said, there are lots and lots of extra resources there. Someone made the comment yesterday that there's way too much, but that could be a good thing also. Remembering that we have to train these kids somehow to retain what they're going to learn in October this year for November next year. That's a 13-month period. We've never ever had to do that before. At the most, they remember something for 8 or 9 weeks, do an exam on it and forget it. So teaching your kids how to retain, teaching them how to revise is a very, very important skill that we all need to do. One of the things that we did for South East region, which you guys probably sit in as well, is they brought the Brisbane schools of South East we came down to the academy and had a PD session down there. And the teachers that teach the IB spoke to us about what they do to get the kids to do their revision. The thing that I took away, a couple of good points, but the biggest one I took away was in their planning of their lessons, every 5 weeks they do a revision lesson. And then they use that. So if you're sitting down working out, now do this, and this, one of your lessons in week 5 becomes a complete revision lesson. So what you've taught from week 1 to week 5, you do revise in that lesson. Week 10, you revise what you've done from week 1 to week 10. Week 15, from 1 to 15. So they're getting it. So they're getting it more than once. Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
You're right. Research shows that we need to interact with something more than once to be able to retain it. So that going back and asking them, just throw them a simple question. When we do our lesson structure, we do what's called a do now, which is our sort of part of our entry routine into the classroom. Write something up on the board that you taught 3 or 4 weeks ago. Get your textbook and open up to a random page and ask them a question from the content on that page that you've already taught it. Pull out the Year 11 book, ask them a random question. Get them thinking about, going back into their memory and thinking about what it is that they've learned and making those connections. So I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. So there's lots of teaching notes, lesson plans, assessment tasks. I actually did I don't know if you've used them, the unit outlines or the teaching plans for Unit 1 and 2, and I was very conscious of that when I was putting those together. I've gone back to a previous couple of topics and thrown some little revision type questions in, something, a lesson that's got nothing to do with what that was about. The toolkit is probably something that you're familiar with. It has a complete list of the cognitive verbs. It also has a description of the different types of assessment tasks. So 3 of our 4 assessment tasks are new to, or really all 4 are new to us. Okay, the data test is nothing like we've done before, and I think most of you have probably done a data test. The research investigation to me is like an ER, but this time we're evaluating a claim. We're no longer evaluating a biological issue, thank God. And the student experiment is a mini EEI, so that's probably the easiest one to get our heads around. The others are a little bit more difficult. So in your toolkit, there are some hints and tips for the kids on how to approach those different assessment tasks. As I said, there's the cognitive verbs and there's some other little skills in there. Okay, so what do we have in this volume? So again, similar layout to the 1 and 2. So the key ideas are clearly listed at the beginning of each chapter. There are case studies spread throughout the chapter, and again, that covers probably most of the sciences of human endeavour dot points within the syllabus. There are work examples, the study tips, which appear in the columns and the margins of the pages, and I think that they're great little hints for the kids. The margin glossary, so if there's new words, new definitions that the kids need to know, they are right there beside the text that they're learning about. The check your learning, so the questions at the end of each section. Sciences of human endeavours we talked about. Chapter review, more questions, more practice at explaining yourself using those cognitive verbs. And then the unit practice questions. Okay, so there are exam questions. So there are lots and lots of opportunities for the kids to practice, probably way more than you could ever cover in any of your lessons. Great opportunity to set homework. And as I said, if you're doing chapter 5, go back and get them to do the revision from chapter 1 at some stage. Just throw a red herring at them and see how they cope. Probably won't like you much. So just a page layout. So this is from the genetics chapter. So again, nice and clear, lots of colour. The glossary definitions in the margin, the study tips, and the worked examples. Okay, nice and easy to read. One of the case studies covering one of the sciences of human endeavour dot points, listing the key ideas. Again, check your learning. And these little boxes, which appear on just about every second or third page, are the links to the resources in the O-book. Okay, so it clearly tells you what other supporting resources are there for that particular section of each chapter. Okay, in the workbook, there's that toolkit again, okay, with the complete list of cognitive verbs again, so it's always there. We actually put the cog verbs into our student planners for the kids this year. I think probably a lot of schools have gone down that way, so the kids have ready access to the cognitive verbs, even from our Year 7s all the way up. Chapter checklist, which is a self-determination, and we'll show you an example of those in a minute. Data drills, so there's that all-important doing all those calculations, which is a skill that we're going to have to develop. Experiment Explorer, so looking at what skills they need to do the particular mandatory pracs, and as I said, they have all been videoed and they sit on the platform. There's a research review, so it gives the kids a claim and then steps them through how to develop the research questions to evaluate that claim. I think that's probably going to be one of the big things that we struggle to get right, just like we've struggled for the last 20 years to get an EBI right. think we've just got it right and they've taken it away from us. Exam excellence, so that again, those practice style questions. And as I said, when I was looking at that, I was very aware of the QCAA protocol for questions, which are, with multiple choice, not having a not question. So the questions reflect, hopefully, the style that we're going to see in the external exam. So when the kids actually get there, they're not going to pass out because they don't have no idea what they're talking about. Practice for the internal assessments, and then the pracs to support them as well, and all the answers. So for every question, there's an answer. So this is an example of a data drill. Okay, so a set of data, a couple of things to do with the data drill. This is the little chapter checklist which I was talking about. So it gives the kids an idea. So there's some statements here, and they can go along and say, I can confidently do that, I can partially do that, or I have no idea at all. All right, so it's a quick little self-check for the kids. Obviously, if they've ticked the not really column, it's something that they need to go back and review. If they've ticked the confidently column, then they can probably move on and not worry about that. This would be a great thing to go back and do in your review lessons if you've put them into your teaching program. Let's have a look at what you said about what you know from chapter 2. Do you still know that? Can you still say confidently that you know that piece of information? So I think that's going to be a great resource for the kids to get them to keep up with that knowledge. Well, this just goes on to the data drill. Remember, you can't ask the kids to draw a graph anymore in a data test. You can, obviously, in their student experiment, would be a way for them to show the analysis of their data, but you can't actually get them to draw a graph anymore in their assessment pieces. So this is an example of the research investigation. So it gives you a little bit of background info, makes a claim, and then it gives the kids practice at writing little research questions that they would use to evaluate that claim. So this would be a great sort of introductory task before you introduce them to IA3. And that's it. That's right.
Why is it going up now?
I didn't know that either.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea, but I didn't get them to it. So.
But you can in the student experiment.
In the experiment you can, but in the data test you can't. You can't get them to, it's one of the criteria. So in the portal under the resource tab, there is some samples, and there's, I'm not sure what they're called, but there's information there. Now that the endorsement app is live, if you go in there, there's the QA check, that's what they call the QA checklist, so the quality assurance checklist for each of the different assessment styles. If you go into the endorsement app and click on it, there is an actual tab which has the checklist, and that's the checklist that we would use as at the endorsement process. So you could endorse, or you could have a look at your piece of assessment before your principal delegate hits the submit button in the portal to see if you think it's going to be endorsed or not. Okay, so there are in the portal there's a plethora of information about the new task and things like that. If you get stuck, just ring QCW. They're really, really helpful. I'm not sure. I would hate to think the volume of phone calls that they get every day.
Yeah.
But usually if they can't answer the question, they'll put you on to somebody who can answer that question.